Let's talk about one of the most critical systems in any vehicle. The one place where a tiny mistake, a small oversight, can lead to complete and total engine failure. I'm talking about the cooling system. And believe me, it's way more than just a radiator and some hoses. It's the absolute lifeline of the engine. Getting this repair right isn't just important, it's everything.
So think about this for a second. What's the real connection between a simple little drip from a hose and a completely trashed engine? Well, the answer lies in the incredible pressure and intense heat that this system is constantly battling every single second the engine's running. That's why understanding this system isn't just a suggestion, it is a hard and fast requirement.
You know, it's funny. The cooling system is so often overlooked. It just kind of does its job in the background. But it is the silent guardian of the engine. A failure here? That's not some minor inconvenience. It can be the end of the line for that engine. So to make sure that never happens on your watch, we're going to break down 5 unbreakable rules that every single professional needs to live by.
And that brings us right to our first and, honestly, the most fundamental rule of all. You have got to know the system. And I don't mean just being able to name the parts. I mean a deep, foundational understanding of how it all works before you even think about picking up a tool.
Look, it really boils down to this simple truth. You cannot diagnose a fault in a system you do not understand. Period. A real diagnosis starts up here, with knowledge, not in your hands with a wrench. It's all about figuring out the why, long before you start hunting for the what.
In this foundation, it goes way beyond just naming parts like the water pump or the radiator. We're talking about understanding the physics behind it, how heat actually moves through conduction, convection, and radiation. It's knowing the crucial differences between coolant types and why getting that water ratio exactly right is so incredibly important.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It gets to the heart of the matter. Are you just a parts swapper, basically throwing parts at a car and hoping one of them sticks? Or are you a true diagnostician who methodically finds the actual root cause? That difference, that gap between the two, is built entirely on a strong conceptual foundation.
Okay, so you've got the knowledge. What's next? Well, our next rule is all about safety. And folks, this one is absolutely non-negotiable. Rule number 2 is respect the pressure.
Let me say this as clearly as I can. Never, ever, under any circumstances, open a hot, pressurized cooling system. When it's at operating temperature, that system isn't just holding hot water. It's containing superheated, pressurized coolant and steam that can and will explode with terrifying force. So what does that mean in practice? It means you follow the correct safety protocol every single time. You let that system cool down all the way. You physically verify that the pressure is gone. And only then do you use the proper technique to open it. There are 0 shortcuts here. None.
And if you ever, for a second, think about cutting a corner on this, I want you to remember this fact. This isn't some theoretical what-if danger. It's a very real-world risk, and it is a leading cause of serious life-altering injuries in workshops. Respecting that pressure isn't just good practice, it's what keeps you in one piece.
All right, let's move on to rule number 3. This brings us back to the mental side of the job. Once it's actually safe to work on the car, your first move isn't to start replacing things. It's to diagnose, not guess.
See, professional diagnosis isn't some kind of mysterious art form. It's a science, and it requires a methodical, structured strategy. You don't just poke around and test things randomly. You follow the manufacturer's procedures to build a logical, step-by-step path to the root cause.
This right here breaks down the two mindsets perfectly. On one side, you've got the part swapper. They operate on guesswork. They replace components randomly, and all they're really doing is chasing the symptom, right? Like an overheating engine. But on the other side, you have the diagnostician. They use a strategy. They perform targeted tests, and they identify the real root cause, like a bad sensor that's keeping the fan from ever turning on. So what does a strategic approach actually look like? Well, it means you're using the right tools for the job. You're diving deep into scan tool data, looking at live data streams. You're using pressure testers and combustion leak detectors. You might even be using thermal imagers to literally see how heat is moving or not moving through the system. It's about gathering hard evidence.
And the consequences of skipping this process? Oh, they are huge. You risk getting the diagnosis completely wrong, which means you waste the customer's money on parts they never even needed. And worst of all, you risk that vehicle coming right back to the shop with the exact same problem. That's bad for the customer, and it's terrible for your reputation.
Okay,
So you followed the process, you did the work, and you've nailed the root cause. Awesome. Now we move on to Rule 4, which is all about the hands-on part of the job, and that is repair with precision. This means that every single step of the physical repair has to be done by the book. You're following manufacturer specifications for everything, from how to remove a part to the torque specs on the bolts, and especially when it comes time to refill and bleed the system. No corner cutting.
You know, this process seems pretty straightforward on the surface. Find the right info, replace the part correctly, but I'm telling you, steps 3 and 4 are where so many good jobs go bad. Using the right coolant and the right water mix is vital, yes, but bleeding every last bit of air out of that system, that is absolutely, positively critical.
Because if you don't get all that air out, this is what happens. A single air pocket trapped somewhere in the engine can create a massive hotspot, basically blocking coolant from getting where it needs to go. And that can lead directly to overheating and the exact catastrophic engine damage you were trying to prevent in the first place. A tiny oversight that can cause total failure.
And that brings us to our 5th and final rule. This is all about the professional finish. See, the job isn't over when you put your tools away. You have to test, you have to verify, and you have to document. And make no mistake about this, verification is not an optional step. It's not an afterthought. It is a required task to prove that your repair was successful and the vehicle is safe. It means you have to put that system through its paces and confirm it works correctly under real-world conditions.
So what are you checking? Everything. Are the cooling fans cycling on and off at the right temperature? Is the new thermostat opening up exactly when it's supposed to? You have to pressure test your own repair to make sure there are no leaks. And then, of course, you clean up your work area, dispose of the old coolant properly, and you fill out the paperwork.
And why is this so important? Because a system that looks perfectly fine sitting there in the workshop could spring a leak and fail just a few miles down the road if it hasn't been properly tested under pressure. This final step protects the customer, it protects their vehicle, and it protects your professional integrity.
So after all that, we end with this question. These 5 rules, they're about more than just fixing a cooling system. They're about a professional mindset. They draw a very clear line in the sand. So you have to ask yourself, are you building your career on guesswork, or are you building it on true craftsmanship? The choice is yours.